My name is Bryce Aubrey. I'm a master's student at the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs in Security and Defense Policy. I generally am interested in in terms of my research interests, I'm interested in particularly Turkish politics and Turkish foreign policy, as well as the wider Middle East, North Africa region, and that sort of neighborhood. And in terms of theory, I'm interested in largely asymmetry between states. Yeah. The paper that I presented today was called Balance of Power in Civil-Military Relations, the Concordance Game and the Turkish Interventions, 1997 and 2007. So basically what the paper was is a sort of theory crafting attempt, a theory crafting exercise by which I'm attempting to improve the explanatory power of civil-military relations theory. So in civil-military relations, there's this problematique, which is how do you create a military that's simultaneously sufficiently powerful to do anything the civilians ask, with a military that is willing to do only what the civilians ask. So the question inherent in that problematique is fundamentally a question of balance of power. How do you balance the power? The issue in the wider CMR literature is that it's kind of been ignored because one of the foundational texts of the field, Samuel Huntington's The Soldier and the State, basically sidestepped this question by saying that we shouldn't look at that because that leads to what he calls subjective civilian control, and that's not good civilian control. What we should actually do is separate the civil and the military spheres and create two separate spheres. And so the theory is that once this separation occurs, the military will functionally automatically professionalize and then will not intervene of its own accord. So my paper basically says we should be looking at balance of power as a function, particularly for states where this isn't an occurrence, and particularly for explanatory theory. Huntington's theory was more of a normative theory. It's how should civil-military relations occur. So basically what I did is I took a separate theory which is Schiff's concordance theory. It's specifically an explanatory theory about why do militaries intervene, why does that occur. And I attempted to take it, adapt it to incorporate an assessment of balance of power, and then following that adaptation, test it on the two Turkish interventions, test it against the two Turkish interventions to see what sort of additional explanations this inclusion of the balance of power concept can provide. The reason it's important is that while there are some strains in civil-military relations research that do conceptually include balance of power as a function, they typically aren't explicitly included. They're only implied. The idea is just how do we measure control, and there's sometimes some sort of power variable included, right? But the issue that I have is that a lot of them generally don't sufficiently define how power operates in a civil-military context. So I think that by including this sort of concept, we can more effectively explain, particularly for states that don't fit the Huntingtonian model, that don't have this sort of separation, there needs to be an understanding of how power is operating. And so for my concordance game model, I included this concept, nice concept of soft power, which is this additional form of power which allows the civilians more access and allows a reduction functionally of military power without actually reducing its real capabilities. In terms of policy implications, what my research found was that in the Turkish coups by memorandum 2007 and 1997, the basic question when I applied it to the case is, why was the coup by memoranda successful in the 1997 case, and why was the attempt unsuccessful in the 2007 case? So what I basically found is that the reason that it was so unsuccessful in the 2007 case was because the military had lost its ability to use soft power. Through the EU accession processes, through these various means, the reduction of its power in the National Security Council, all these sorts of various issues, it had lost its connection to civil society that was fundamental in its ability to bring down the Raifa party in 1997. So in terms of policy implications, if we have a question of how should we effectively establish civilian control, then the question out of this model is how can we reduce to as much as we can the military's ability to use soft power while retaining its hard power. So basically the question is, how do we extract the military, which is already theoretically embedded in civilian society, how do we extract it out of that society and allow the legal civilian authority to step in? So in terms of policy implications, the theory is that if you can get buy-in from the military for those first couple steps, as occurred in the Turkish case, then theoretically, particularly for coup-prone states, there's an eventual sort of avalanche of power, of capabilities that move out of the military's hands, and then theoretically, hopefully, into the hands of civilians, which will allow them to more effectively control the military by preventing it these additional avenues, these additional soft power avenues to attack it.